You are listening to She Rebel Radio. I'm Lulu Minns.
And I'm Mary Lobo. Today we are talking about reacting to creating, and you can download Lulu's free toolkit that goes along with this series.
Mary, hello. I wanted to share a quote with you that I'm convinced, and it's not my quote, so I'm cheating slightly, that life is 10% of what happens to me and 90% of how I react to it. And so it is with you. That's a quote by Charles R. Swindon. What do you make of that?
I 100% agree. It goes back to all the ancient teachings. You don't have control over what happens to you. You do have control over how you react. When I look back on things that have been traumatic for me, I would agree that 90% of it has been my response that's made it far more traumatic. And, if you allow things to take their course and you be an observer, all the things that we are recommended to do to, remove our emotional attachment, to practice detachment, be connected but detached. That's always the better way to go. I know that when I've got myself into situations that are heated and I've responded reactively and really, got upset and been impulsive, it never ends well. But if you can take a step back, take a breath, don't respond, and just sit on it, maybe sleep on it, the next day you come back with something more considered, it's always a better outcome, because at the end of the day, no one else is having to suffer your emotions other than yourself. Even if you unleash, your anger or whatever at somebody, you're still the one that is feeling the anger, feeling all the feelings and going through the physical process. So I would totally agree. It's really difficult to do. That's what
Yeah,
I
I was going to say, you said it's all the things that we know, but they are incredibly difficult to do. So I was going to share with you one thing that I totally overreacted to this morning. And I'd love to hear something that you have reacted to, maybe today or even like this past week or month. But I've been away down in Cornwall hosting a retreat. I've only been back for a few days. My, as you know, I've got two familiars, two cats who are old now, 17 and 14. I think the oldest one, who's sitting behind me because he's been a bit hysterical because the gas man's just been in the house, he's got into this thing of waking me up because he can't remember where the cat tray is. So he did it at 3 a.m. I got up, I showed him the cat tray, I went back to sleep, and he did it again at 6 o'clock this morning, which is my usual getting up time. But I was a little bit thrown because he'd woken me up at 3. I didn't rush because I'd done it at 3 a.m. And then I don't like to give an image of myself on the toilet on the podcast. He came in with me, as he does, and he sprayed in the
Oh,
bathroom. And he's a big cat and he does big wheeze. So I was quite calm initially. And then I just reacted, shuffled him out the bathroom upstairs because my flat's kind of upside down, and kind of shut him in the living room because I didn't want him going anywhere near any of the carpets. And he totally freaked out. And I was a little bit horrible to him. So I feel a bit guilty and
I have a
reactionary.
couple of questions here, because I'm intrigued. Well, I know as well because I've got a male cat. And once I woke up to hearing my male cat weeing on my duvet. It's like, what are you doing, you psychopath? And it literally left like a pool. So number one, I know that the boy cats, they store it, don't they? Their
Yeah.
wee. So they do these really uber long wheeze. So there's a lot of it. But what I wanted to know, and obviously you can't stop it mid-flow because it's just going to go everywhere. But the question I had
Which I
was,
was going to say was why I was waiting patiently, and then I lost my shit and I reacted because it was going on too long. So what are you doing?
but did he do like a little sitting position? Like, did you realize what he was about to do? Did you see him assuming the position?
Yeah, I did. And the quiver of the tail, because they do a little quiver of the tail. I've had him 17 years and I was like, no, 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 no. And then again, I'm not wanting to give listeners an image of me trying to get off the toilet. But it was too late then. I thought, just wait patiently, learn and
And
practice
it
these
just went on.
principles. And it just went
Yeah.
on and on and on.
Mm.
Yeah. So did you have
I'm
another
wondering as
question?
well, do you think
Mm.
he doesn't know where the tray is? Or do you think he just likes the fact that he just wants, as he's getting older, he wants you to mollycoddle him a bit more?
I do think there's an element of that because obviously I've been away for a week and it hadn't happened at all. So I'm
Mm.
back and he wants my attention.
I mean,
And
it's a good
he's
way to get it, isn't it? You
Oh
got it.
yeah, and I will get out of bed because he's got now got it's quite a new meow. It's a particular meow, and even that talking about being reactionary kind of winds me up. So it was kind of I'd been wound up over 3 hours, and mornings are really precious to me, and I know they are to you as well. We're both quite productive,
Mm,
but I'm going to
mm.
talk about that in the creation part anyway. But what's something that you've reacted badly to recently? But I didn't want to scare him. That's my point, listeners. I scared my 17-year-old cat by being
Oh,
mean and
poor
reactionary. I
Otis.
know.
Um, gosh, where do I start? I mean, I could go into the database of my the history of me reacting badly. I probably react badly every day,
Should we
all the
keep a
time.
spreadsheet about our
Yeah.
reactions?
I think probably, yeah, before the day's begun, I tend to already start reacting badly because I have to have a certain order in my house. And with a child, they tend to create lots of disorder, bless them. And that, they go at their own pace. And so before, the day's begun, I'm always like, have you got this? Have you got, and you're repeating yourself like 20 times. And by the time you've repeated yourself, like however many times, obviously you then start getting a bit short. So obviously I would love to be one of those people that just is really calm, but it's not going to happen because I don't actually have time for it. I'm always up against time.
I just an
So
image of you then sitting in meditation pose with chaos going on around you in the morning and just being like, yeah, it's fine.
I would love to, and I know the time will come, and often I fantasize about this. I know that there's going to be a time when I'm older when things will be a lot calmer, and I will probably miss all the chaos. I can
Mm.
imagine there'll be a time when I'll wake up and there won't be anyone needing me, and I won't have to be everywhere at a certain time and be constrained by a schedule. And I'll probably get up and feel quite lost at sea. So it's
Yeah,
about getting the balance, isn't it?
it is definitely. But I think one of the things that is important that you noticed there was not going into a coaching session here is that you want the order of things to be as they are. And if they're not, then that will create a
Mm,
reaction. So that is some of the kind of unpicking, isn't it, of knowing what contributes to us reacting and trying to create the break clause between that happening. And I know when Otis starts that meow, my reaction starts coming and increasing and trying to create the gap with that. But also, Mary, we both come from very different but reactionary careers. If our
hmm.
first
Yeah.
careers, like I was a criminal defense litigator, like world class reactor. I talk about that in the ebook because I was sitting waiting for something to happen. I was waiting for a client to be arrested. I was waiting for the police to cross me in some way and do something they shouldn't. I was waiting for the prosecutor to piss me off, or a
Mm,
judge to try and back me into a corner. So I was like waiting with my spikes out to be like, bang, like I've got this. Particularly
mm,
again as a woman in that role, quite often people would think that I didn't know what they could and couldn't do, and I wasn't going to kind of respond in the way that I did. So that certainly didn't help with my reactionary self
mm.
in other stuff. How about you?
Well, yeah, I started life as an investigative journalist. So, especially, particularly with investigative journalists, because I was undercover. So I was always looking, waiting. Basically my job depended on me being reactionary because if I could find out any information that was going to build on the story, build on the narrative, I had to be very responsive to it. So yeah, that was my previous life. And I think I think I have a natural instinct to be like that. I think being female and being empathetic, you're always trying to anticipate other people's emotions. You're always trying to um, mitigate, negative situations. That's what we do. We look to protect ourselves, to protect others. And so we're very reactionary as women because we're trying to protect our environment. And I think, you know, more so now in our current climate, um, I think a lot of women do feel threatened in the workplace and with the Me Too movement. And so people are always trying to avoid getting themselves in situations that are questionable and things like that. So I think by nature as women, we're always trying to predict what other people are doing to
Yeah,
try and
it's
control our
interesting.
environments.
It's almost that, yeah, being kind of on high alert, isn't it?
Mm.
As you said, within our jobs, and the sexism and things that, totally existed, still does, but in the early part of our careers, even more so. And I felt, and I think it's come up on the podcast before, of being quite naive about those things that I would encounter, and how you're on high alert and reactionary to it. So you're not stepping into a situation where you're going to have to react even stronger,
Yeah,
or
and
feel like you
something
can't.
really funny, interesting happened to me yesterday that I noticed about myself. So I was at lunchtime, I went in somewhere to get a burger, right? It's not something I do often, but I was like, oh, I really fancy a burger from this place in London. And I was on the hoof. I was having to do it quickly. So I went in, it was about midday, and there were loads and loads of builders and just different, you know, laboring I say laborers and people like that who were, it was because it was midday, it was early, so there was a lot of people having like early lunch. And I went in to wait for my food, and I was the only female there.
Hmm.
And
You're the only female wanting a burger at like 12 o'clock on a Tuesday in London.
the only female wanting a burger at 12.
Owning it.
Who doesn't care about the calorific content, yeah. And so there were, I have worked a lot with in all male environments. I've worked on building sites once. I was document controller back in the day. I've also worked in logistics where I was the only woman. So I've worked with men. So I don't find men per se intimidating. But anyway, I just noticed that I became slightly self-conscious that I was the only woman there. And there were, people were all in their groups and chatting or whatever. And when I got my meal, as in when it was ready, I went and faced the back wall. So there's a back wall with, bar stools where you could
Yeah.
go and eat there quickly, or there were lots of tables and everyone was sat at the tables. And I became really self-conscious about sitting down around all these men eating a burger. And I went and faced the wall so no one could watch me eat. And as I did it, I thought, oh my God, like, isn't that, like, why am I
Yeah.
doing this? But I felt more comfortable that way. I felt really uncomfortable sitting down, eating the burger in the middle of the restaurant, being the only female, and I felt safer facing the wall, so it was just my people could only see my back.
Hmm.
But I was aware that I was doing that. And that's the first time I've really ever sort of done something like that. And I thought to myself, I bet these are the kind of situations that women find themselves in a lot, and people make these decisions every day. I've never felt the need or inclination, but that was the feeling I had yesterday, and I became quite aware of it because I've never chosen to sit somewhere because I felt embarrassed, but I felt really self-conscious.
So you gave yourself like a detention, as we started off talking about cats, when they just sit by the wall
I
and they
stared at a
stare at the
wall.
wall. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
maybe they're feeling self-conscious about something. But yeah, it's interesting that our behavior changes. But I also,
Mm.
looking back at the ebook, and the listeners can download the toolkit, because there's a real potential for rewriting parts of this book. Originally, I was going to share it, but part of this reaction section really made me uncomfortable, because it's me reflecting on where I was 10 years ago in 2014. It's my 10-year anniversary of leaving legal practice and being in this highly reactionary position, and wondering
Mm.
kind of where my life had gone wrong. Like,
Mm.
dating the wrong person, all of the stuff. And yeah, it made me feel quite vulnerable reading that back, and
Mm.
also reflecting on it being a real, probably less glamorous version, but Eat, Pray, Love moment. Have you read Eat, Pray, Love, or
I
seen any
have years
bits of
ago.
it?
I read it when everyone else was reading it. I
Yeah. And
loved it. I loved the book. I didn't enjoy the film as much.
no, same. It kind of, I love Julia Roberts, but it kind of, it ran through it very quickly. But her Eat, Pray, Love moment is, she really is like, I'm married to this guy. Like, where's this
Mm.
going? And I think it's something that happens a lot to us, as women in our kind of 30s, where we've done all the things that we're told that we should do, getting the high level job or the perfect guy or all of that stuff, having a child, whatever it might be. And then they're like, God, is this it? And we realize we've been reacting to our life rather than actually consciously creating it, which is where this kind of principle comes in. But we can see that those reactions are essential for safety and also for, really valuable careers where we both started.
And I think just going back to that book, what I took away from the book as well that I didn't see so much in the film was when she was thinking about leaving the perfect, in inverted commas, relationship, she was really worried, not just about him. She knew she had to do it for herself. It's not just about hurting her partner, but also about how it would appear to everybody else, because she knows that people used to look at her and be like, wow, you're with this guy, you've got this great relationship. So quite a lot of us breaking down these barriers. It's not just about just getting out of our situation. It's about getting out of this image we think other people have of us, and feeling so desperately sad that you're crushing that image for people, which we shouldn't even be considering what other people think, because your friends should support you. But so often we make so many decisions based on what other people think of us and how we're viewed in other people's eyes.
Yeah, and society's, depiction of success and what that actually looks like. And I think back to even like the house that I only sold a couple of, well, yeah, 2 years ago, that I was living in at the time of legal practice, and I'd left the really creative hub of Brighton. It's like, feeling like my soul sucked out, but I was doing all the things that I kind of thought I should do, and reacting and not creating. So yeah, it's really important that, fitting in. And there's that scene, isn't there, where, they're all at a party and,
And
all
she
of
goes
that
and
stuff.
cries, doesn't she, she goes in a broom, not in a cupboard or something. She goes away somewhere and cries
Yeah. Whereas
away
now
from
she'd go into a broom
the
cupboard and start recording a podcast or
yeah,
something, wouldn't she?
yeah, exactly.
So shifting out of the shadow principle of reacting, it has its value. And I reiterate that this series is about that we need both of these things in balance and harmony, not either or. But we tend to live life more in the shadow based principles, which, if they're out of balance, cause big problems for us, into creation, where we're creating our lives day to day, moment to moment, year to year. And, you and I, Mary, are both hugely creative these days. I think even more so than when we met like 5 years ago or whatever. Um,
Yeah, definitely.
how did you no, let me reframe that. How was your life more creative, or, business and things like that, more creative than it was 10 years ago?
Okay, well, yeah, definitely. I would say it's more creative now because I've had to be creative with how I use my time and what I can do in the time that I have. So my daughter was 10 yesterday, so talking about that
Ah,
number is significant.
isn't it?
Um, so yeah, a decade of being a parent. So prior to that, obviously, I could pretty much do what I wanted when I wanted, in terms of I could, if I wanted to stay up till 2 in the morning working, I could. If I wanted to, um, go away, collaborate, do whatever, whenever I wanted, I had the freedom of that. So I had a much more opportunity to be creative prior to being a parent. But now I find myself more creative because I'm only going to choose the things that really light my fire, because I don't have enough time to do everything. Um, B, I have to carve out time within a limited amount of time. So I'm much more high functioning because I only have a short amount of time. So I don't have this kind of luxury of going, oh, I can spend, days and days working on this. Sometimes it's like, right, I've got half a day and I've got to make it happen in this half a day.
Hmm.
So my
And you
mind is
and you and
sharp.
I have talked about our power mornings, that we're both
Yeah.
highly functioning between like 5 a.m. and 10 a.m.
Oh, yeah. And as well, I find, and this is what we spoke about, that there is something for me about any hour before 8 o'clock in the morning, for me, is the equivalent of 2 hours of work in terms of productivity. So if I get up at like 4 or 5 to work, and I, work for 3 hours, it's equivalent of working 6 hours in productivity for me anytime before 8 in the morning. So I can do that work that some people think is insane that I would get up at that time. But then it almost, like, from 9 o'clock onwards, I can actually start slowing down. And if you
Yeah.
think in terms of, if you have a child and you're doing the school run and things like that, my day has to be over by 3 o'clock, because regardless of whether I can still jump on calls or the computer after that time, my the amount I can concentrate and focus on what I can get done is limited. So for me, really, my morning power hours are when I get things done.
Did you have your skincare business 10 years ago?
I actually, this is interesting. So I was married and I wanted to get pregnant, and I tried for like a year to get pregnant, which I know is not particularly a long time, but when you're in it, it does feel like a long time. And then decided that I just had to sort of let it go, becoming, it becoming an issue for me. So I started my business in January 2014. I opened up this facial salon. So it was before I had, developed the skincare formula, but I'd opened a facial salon where I was doing treatments and I was blending oils. And I opened that just as New Year, just after New Year of 2014. And I found out I was pregnant on the 22nd of January. So
Ah,
I
so
literally
like,
opened my business and was pregnant.
yeah, a massive creative time. And that's also something that we have in common in terms of I started my first, I don't think we've spoken about this before, my first business in 2014, because it's the year in the December, I left legal practice. But in the May, I mean, I had a horrendous meeting at work where I was criticized for my personality, which is something that women receive in positions of leadership, which men do not. But that's a sideline. But I'd already started, me and a colleague were creating this dating business, which was so horrendous. And I actually hated the business when we rolled it out, but I loved the creative process and having a notebook and getting a website, so it was the real
Mm.
start of that. And Elizabeth Gilbert is massive on creativity. She has written a book called Big Magic, Living Life Creatively. I'm not sure. Have you read that one?
No, I haven't read that one.
I highly recommend. But what does it mean to you to live life creatively, and what fears do you think we need to face in order to do that? And that is something she addresses in the book. So I recommend it to our listeners as well as to create. And I think how creative the podcast is in ebooks, and I've written my own coaching courses right from the beginning that really create impact and fulfills my creativity. Is that we have to maybe do those things without attachment to the outcome of them making
Mm.
us money, or the same with your skincare stuff. So what fears do you think we have to face in order to be creative and not let it block our creativity?
Well, I think one of the really important fears that we have to face is the fear of failure. And I know with myself, sometimes I've been scared to do things because I think, what if it goes wrong? Like, what if it is a disaster? What if this thing that I really want to do, that I really want to achieve, is a disaster? And then everyone will know it's been a disaster and I will be embarrassed,
Mm.
And actually, as I've got older, I've just come to realize that, the best, some of the best creators out there have failed 100 times over. And just because you failed doesn't mean that that means that that project or what you're doing is the wrong thing. It just means you find a different way, or it needs to be done executed in a different way. And so it's just about being okay with, you're going to try something and it might not work as we anticipate immediately off the bat, but that is completely normal. And to normalize failure and just trying again, instead of making, you know holding ourselves up to such high standards that failure means that we were never meant to do it. That's completely wrong. You can be a great artist and do some terrible works. It doesn't mean that your future works won't be amazing.
Yeah, and there's that saying, I can't remember who it's by, there's a few failing quotes that
Oh,
I like, but
Einstein, isn't it?
if you're
Something about
if you're you don't know what one I'm going to say yet. If
I'm
you're not failing,
anticipating.
you're not trying hard enough.
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's one of them. And I definitely, with starting my first business with a colleague, and also, we were at law school together and things like that, so we were good friends but working at the same firm, and I was her manager at that point, and we were bored shitless and all the politics. um you know at the same time we started that together because certainly for me, I was scared to fail in doing something by myself. So I really had to, I
Mm.
could spread the failure and we could both hide behind it a little bit,
Mm.
without realizing all that work that I needed, to do on me. To and I just couldn't anticipate when I did my first retreat, and I had two clients who came over from America to my retreat in Morocco. Like I couldn't believe it, and I was just sitting in the room in the Riyadh, hearing the laughter of these seven women who'd come to spend that time with me in Morocco, and I was just like, wow, like how did I
I've done
create
this.
this? How have I done this? And that they want to be here and spend this time with me was really, really magical. And I hosted my 11th retreat, only last week, a few weeks ago. So it's bringing that extra layer of wisdom, maturity to all it is that we do. So any tips for before we close, for living life, more creatively, apart from the obvious, I guess, of, again, we go back to like yoga, meditation, being in nature. Like creativity does need space, I think. Finding our power hours is super
Well, actually,
important.
you just made me think as well when you were talking a second ago, and I think this is relevant when you were saying about, spreading the failure that um, that you, because you were doing it with a friend, it was just like, okay, well, we can sort of both hide behind each other. And I was just going to say that that's the same applies, that quite often people want to do things, like maybe they want to travel somewhere or they want to go to a workshop or go on a course or something, and they feel that they have to go with someone else
Mm.
because they don't want to go alone, because it might be going to going in to a group of people that they don't know, and they'd rather have someone they know there, or even going abroad to a retreat and they don't want to go on their own. But I was going to say that all the people that I know who planned to go somewhere with someone, and for whatever reason the other person dropped out or they've had to go and face it alone, they've always had so much more of a better time because they were thrown into an environment where they had to sort of stand on their own 2 feet and really kind of dig deep to get the best out of the situation. And I also know other people that have gone to things with someone with them as a pair, and they've actually felt that the other person's held them back in some way because
Yeah.
maybe they haven't gone to speak to new people because they've had their mate there, and so you just end up talking to your mate. So one of the things that I would say about creativity is absolutely 100% you get out of your comfort zone, do the thing that makes you feel the most scared, and that's when you will naturally tap into your creativity. Remaining in a comfortable environment just does not isn't
No,
productive.
no,
See.
no. Discomfort creates creativity, and also conversations create. And you saying that, I went to so many networking things, and and people were saying, "Oh, Lulu, you've got like such a massive, incredible network." It's like when I left legal practice, I had like 10 phone numbers of, family, friends, the guy I was dating, and, police officers and people that were accused of criminal offences. It's not really something I could build a business on. So I really got out there. And, if I went to a networking event with somebody else, and we shared on the last episode how we met at a business,
Mm.
breakfasty brunch thing, that if I'd gone with a friend or you gone with a friend, we probably wouldn't have had the conversation that
No,
we've
because
had.
yeah, because I would have sat next to that person, wouldn't necessarily have sat next to you. And if I was sat next to you, I might have done, done some cursory chit chat, but we probably wouldn't have got into such an in-depth chat. And I wouldn't have told you that I would be an amazing person to have on your podcast.
I know. And then we wouldn't be here right now. And also, I attended a retreat just before lockdown in 2020, with a group of Americans, mostly of them from Seattle. It turns out most of them knew each other. There was some Canadian women as well. And they called me Bridget Jones throughout. It was hilarious. And then Yvonne, who's amazing, who's one of the hosts, she came to my retreat, in the UK 6 months ago. So, I really developed those relationships by just being bold enough. But I had those moments of like, what the hell am I doing? I've like arrived
Mm.
in Mexico and I'm just attending this random retreat. So yeah.
Mm.
But as we close, please don't forget that you can download a copy of the toolkit, in the link in the show notes. And Mary is going to share with us what she's letting go of this week. And I'm going to share what I'm choosing instead.
This week, I will be the woman who lets go of reaction. I will do this by owning my irritability and my need to get things done yesterday, and accept that not everybody has to work to my time frames.
Nice, nice. This week, I will be the woman who chooses to create. I will do this by, I'm going to cheat here as a warning, everyone, creating this podcast series for you. Because I've got 14 other episodes to outline. So it's a big commitment from me from now through to January as we're sharing these principles and the toolkit with you. So it's been amazing to be with you on She Rebel Radio. Thank you so much for joining me, Mary, as well.
Thank you.
You've been listening to She Rebel Radio with me, Lulu Mins.
And me, Mary Lobo. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you left us a review.
And perhaps you could share this episode with another amazing woman.